Money fluttered to the marble floor like snow. Not just any money, a blank check torn violently in half by a man whose name made Boston's underworld tremble. Gabriel Santoro's dark eyes locked onto his mother with a chilling, dead-eyed glare, his massive frame shielding Chloe's trembling, curvy body. "If you ever insult my woman again," he whispered, his voice dripping with lethal promise, "I'll forget you gave me life." But this wasn't a fairy tale. It was a war. Flour dusted the air of sweet confections, catching the dim afternoon light that filtered through the frosted windows overlooking Hanover Street. Chloe Harper wiped the back of her wrist across her forehead, leaving a streak of powdered sugar across her brow. She was exhausted. Running a bakery in Boston's North End was a grueling endeavor, but keeping it afloat while drowning in her late father's medical debts from Massachusetts General Hospital was nearly impossible. Chloe was a woman built for comfort, not the runway. Her hips were generous, her thighs thick, and her apron struggled to contain the deep curve of her bust. For years she had hidden her body behind oversized chef coats and baggy jeans, convinced she was invisible to the kind of men who frequented the high-end clubs downtown. She preferred the safety of her kitchen, the precise measurements of vanilla bean and browned butter, where the world made mathematical sense. Then Gabriel Santoro walked through her door. Bells chimed above the entrance, signaling a customer, but the heavy, suffocating silence that followed was entirely unnatural. Chloe looked up from her kneading board. The man standing in her tiny shop looked like he had stepped out of a shadowy, violent dream. He wore a bespoke charcoal Brioni suit that stretched taut over broad, predatory shoulders. His hair was thick and dark, swept back from a face carved from granite. But it was his eyes that stole the breath from Chloe's lungs. They were a piercing, cold amber. Flanking him were two men who looked less like bodyguards and more like executioners, their hands resting entirely too close to the subtle bulges beneath their jackets. "I'm looking for the owner," the man said. His voice was a low, resonant baritone that vibrated against the glass display cases. "That's me," Chloe managed to say, wiping her hands on a towel and stepping out from behind the counter. She felt acutely aware of her messy bun, the flour on her jeans, and the way her soft stomach pressed against the fabric of her apron. "How can I help you?" Gabriel's amber eyes swept over her. It wasn't the dismissive glance Chloe was used to from wealthy men. It was a slow, consuming appraisal. He looked at the curve of her hips, the fullness of her breasts, and finally her flushed face. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched the corner of his mouth. "I have a family event this weekend at the Langham Hotel," Gabriel said, stepping closer. The scent of cedarwood, expensive tobacco, and something intrinsically dangerous enveloped her. "I need 3,000 pastries, cannolis, sfogliatelle, and your signature dark chocolate truffles. Money is no object." Chloe blinked, her mind racing. 3,000? That was a month's rent, maybe two. "Sir, I'm a one-woman operation. An order that size requires at least 2 weeks' notice." "I don't have 2 weeks," he replied smoothly, reaching into his inner jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick stack of crisp $100 bills bound by a gold money clip and dropped it onto the glass counter. It landed with a heavy, authoritative thud. "I have 48 hours, and I only want you." The way he said you made Chloe's pulse hammer erratically against her throat. She stared at the money. It was at least $10,000, enough to keep the loan sharks at bay for another few months. "I'll do it," she whispered. "Good." He turned to leave but paused at the door. "My name is Gabriel. See you Friday, Chloe." He knew her name. She hadn't given it to him. For the next 2 days, Chloe operated on pure adrenaline and espresso. She didn't sleep, her hands a blur of dough, ricotta, and tempered chocolate. But the true test of her endurance wasn't the baking. It was the sudden, terrifying interruption on Thursday evening. Rain lashed against the windows of the bakery when the front door was kicked open. Declan Murphy, a low-level enforcer for the Southie factions, who had acquired her father's debt, swaggered in, trailing muddy boots across her pristine floor. 2 bruisers flanked him. "Time's up, sweetheart," Declan sneered, tapping a crowbar against his palm. "We warned you about missing the Thursday deadline. Your old man's markers are due. Since you don't have the cash, we're taking the ovens. And maybe," he eyed her chest, "we'll take a little collateral on the side." Chloe backed away, terrified, clutching a heavy rolling pin. "I have the money. I just got a deposit. Too late for deposits," Declan barked, lunging forward to grab her apron. Before his fingers could graze her fabric, a shadow moved from the alleyway door. Gabriel Santoro materialized like a demon summoned from the dark. He didn't yell. He didn't boast. He simply grabbed Declan's outstretched wrist, twisted it with a sickening crack, and slammed the man's face into the marble counter so hard the glass display below it shattered. Chloe screamed, backing against the wall. Gabriel's men flooded the shop, disarming Declan's thugs in seconds. Gabriel stood over a groaning, bleeding Declan. "This territory belongs to the Santoro Syndicate now," Gabriel said softly, adjusting his cuff links. "And this woman is under my protection. If a single Southie rat so much as breathes on her street again, I will personally mail your mother your teeth." He kicked Declan out the door, his men tossing the other 2 thugs out into the rain like garbage. The bakery fell dead silent. Chloe was trembling uncontrollably, her chest heaving. She realized then who he was. The Santoro family, the undisputed kings of the Boston Mafia. Gabriel turned to her, the violent monster vanishing in an instant. He took a handkerchief from his pocket, stepped over the broken glass, and gently wiped a splatter of Declan's blood from Chloe's cheek. His touch was terrifyingly tender. "Are you hurt?" he murmured, his thumb brushing over her soft jawline. You're Gabriel Santoro," she breathed, terrified. "I am," he said, his eyes darkening with possessive heat. "And you, Chloe, are exactly where you belong." Fear should have driven her away, but desperation and an intoxicating, forbidden attraction anchored Chloe in place. Gabriel didn't just pay her for the pastries. He systematically began dismantling the obstacles in her life. The next morning, Chloe found a certified letter from the bank slipped under her door. The crushing debt her father, Arthur, had left behind, a staggering sum that had kept Chloe awake every night for 3 years, was marked paid in full. She marched straight to the Santoro family's legitimate front, a massive importing firm overlooking Boston Harbor. Bypassing heavily armed security, who surprisingly parted like the Red Sea for her, she stormed into Gabriel's corner office. He was sitting behind a mahogany desk, an unlit cigar between his fingers, listening to a terrified man in a cheap suit plead for his life. Upon seeing Chloe, Gabriel waved his hand. The terrified man was dragged out of the room instantly. "You bought my debt," Chloe accused, her chest rising and falling heavily. She was wearing a simple wrap dress that hugged her thick curves, and Gabriel's eyes immediately dropped to her waist. "I eliminated a distraction," Gabriel replied, standing up and closing the distance between them. He moved with the predatory grace of a panther. "You were stressing. It was affecting your sleep. I don't like it when you look tired, Mia Dolcezza. I am not your anything," Chloe snapped, though her heart fluttered wildly at the Italian endearment. "I don't want mafia blood money paying for my life. I am not some doll you can buy, Gabriel." Gabriel trapped her against the heavy wooden door, placing a hand on either side of her head. The proximity was overwhelming. He smelled of power and spice. "I didn't buy you, Chloe. I cleared the board so you could see me without the weight of the world on your shoulders. You think your body, your curves, your spirit, you think any of that can be bought. I don't want a transaction. I want you." He leaned in, his lips brushing the sensitive skin below her ear. Chloe gasped, her hands coming up to push against his chest, but her fingers betrayed her, curling into the expensive fabric of his suit instead. "I'm dangerous, Chloe," he whispered against her skin. "Run now, or I will never let you go." She didn't run. Over the next 2 months, Chloe tumbled into a gilded cage. Gabriel was a paradox. In the underworld, he was a ruthless boss who orchestrated multi-million-dollar extortion rackets and crushed his rivals without mercy. But with Chloe, he was a devoted worshipper. He adored her body, constantly feeding her, touching her, praising the soft weight of her thighs and the fullness of her stomach, erasing years of insecurities left by cruel ex-boyfriends who had told her she was too big. But the velvet trap had a cost. The world Gabriel lived in was steeped in aristocracy and bloodlines. It came to a head at the annual Santoro Charity Gala, hosted at the glittering Fairmont Copley Plaza. Gabriel had insisted Chloe attend as his date, not his caterer. He had a custom gown commissioned for her, a deep emerald silk that cinched her waist and cascaded over her hips, exposing a tantalizing amount of cleavage. When Gabriel led her into the grand ballroom, the music seemed to falter. Hundreds of eyes turned toward them. Politicians, police commissioners, and mob bosses alike stared at the woman on Gabriel Santoro's arm. Chloe felt incredibly self-conscious. The women in the room were thin, surgically enhanced, dripping in inherited diamonds, and staring at Chloe with undisguised contempt. Gabriel's grip on her waist tightened. He kissed the side of her head, ignoring the whispers. "You are the most beautiful woman in this room." Let them stare. However, one pair of eyes wasn't just staring. They were plotting. Through the crowd parted a woman who commanded the room simply by breathing. Camilla Santoro, Gabriel's mother and the ruthless matriarch of the family, glided toward them. She wore a tailored Chanel suit, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her neck adorned with a Cartier diamond necklace that could have funded a small country. Camilla stopped in front of them. Her eyes, the same chilling amber as her son's, raked over Chloe like a butcher inspecting cheap meat. "Gabriel," Camilla said, her voice smooth and cold, "you didn't tell me you were bringing staff to the gala." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Mother, this is Chloe Harper. She is my partner for the evening, and you will treat her with respect." Camilla offered a razor-thin smile. "Of course, Miss Harper. I hear you bake wonderful little cakes. How quaint." She leaned in slightly, her perfume smelling like roses and arsenic. "Enjoy the champagne, my dear. It costs more than your bakery makes in a year." Camilla walked away, leaving a trail of ice in her wake. Chloe felt her face burn with humiliation, but Gabriel pulled her into his chest. "Ignore her," Gabriel growled, his eyes tracking his mother with dangerous intensity. "She has no power over us." But Chloe knew the truth about families like this. The matriarch always held the strings, and Camilla Santoro had just declared war on a baker from the North End. 2 days after the gala, the Boston sky was gray and weeping with a cold drizzle. Chloe was in the back room of her bakery, going over inventory, when the front door locked with a sharp, echoing click. She stepped out of the kitchen, wiping flour from her hands only to freeze. Camilla Santoro stood in the center of the shop, holding a leather Prada umbrella. 2 massive bodyguards stood outside, blocking the windows from the street. The matriarch surveyed the humble bakery with a look of profound disgust, running a gloved finger over the glass display case and examining the non-existent dust. "Mrs. Santoro," Chloe said, her voice shaking slightly. She stood her ground, refusing to cower. "The shop is closed." I know, Camilla said, turning to face her. I had the block cleared. We need to have a very realistic conversation, Miss Harper, woman to woman. Camilla walked slowly toward the counter, her heels clicking ominously against the tile. She opened her crocodile skin purse, pulled out a thick, cream-colored checkbook bearing the seal of a prominent Swiss offshore bank, and laid it on the glass. She uncapped a gold Mont Blanc pen. Gabriel is a passionate man, Camilla began, her tone conversational but laced with venom. He has always had a soft spot for strays. A few years ago, it was a racehorse with a broken leg. Now it's a plump little baker with a tragic backstory. He likes to fix things. Chloe felt a flush of anger rise to her cheeks. I am not a stray, and I don't need fixing. Don't you? Camilla laughed softly, a dry, cruel sound. Look at yourself. You are heavily in debt, wearing clothes off the rack, and carrying entirely too much weight for a man of Gabriel's status. You are an indulgence, Chloe, a temporary appetite. Men like my son have their fun with girls like you in the shadows, but they marry breeding, power, and legacy. Camilla scrawled her signature at the bottom of the check and slid it across the glass counter toward Chloe. The amount line was blank. This is an unlimited draft, Camilla said coldly. Take it. Pay off whatever scraps of debt Gabriel missed. Buy yourself a bigger bakery in another city. Chicago, perhaps. Go find a nice middle-class husband who appreciates your abundant proportions. But you will leave Boston today, and you will never speak to my son again. Chloe stared at the blank check. The power it represented was staggering, but the insult burned hotter than any oven in her kitchen. She looked up, her blue eyes flashing with sudden, fierce pride. Keep your money, Chloe said, pushing the check back across the glass. I didn't ask for Gabriel, and I certainly didn't ask for your permission. If he wants me gone, he can tell me himself. Until then, get out of my bakery. Camilla's eyes narrowed into slits of pure fury. You stupid, naive little cow. You think you've won his heart? You don't even know who he is. Before Camilla could say another word, the heavy wooden door of the bakery was ripped open with such force the hinges groaned. Gabriel stood in the doorway, breathing heavily, rain soaking his dark hair and ruining his expensive suit. He looked like the angel of death. He stalked into the room, his presence sucking the air from the space. He didn't look at Chloe. His deadly gaze was fixated entirely on his mother. Gabriel stepped to the counter, picked up the blank check, and looked at it. Gabriel, darling, Camilla said, her voice trembling slightly for the first time. I was simply handling a loose end for the family. Money fluttered to the marble floor like snow. Gabriel tore the blank check in half, then into quarters, letting the pieces fall. His dark amber eyes locked onto his mother with a chilling, dead-eyed glare, his massive frame shifting to shield Chloe's trembling, curvy body from his mother's view. If you ever insult my woman again, Gabriel whispered, his voice dripping with lethal promise, I'll forget you gave me life. You will be exiled from this family, cut off from the accounts, and banished to Sicily before the sun sets. Do you understand me? Camilla paled, taking a step back. She had never seen her son look at her with such genuine hatred, but as she retreated toward the door, a cruel, vindictive smile curled onto her lips. If she was going down, she was taking the baker with her. How chivalrous, Camilla mocked, stopping at the threshold. She looked past Gabriel, meeting Chloe's wide, terrified eyes. But tell me, Chloe, has your white knight told you the truth about your father? About Arthur? Gabriel's entire body tensed. Mother, shut your mouth, he roared, reaching for his waist. Tell her, Gabriel. Camilla shrieked, her aristocratic mask shattering. Tell her who held the marker on Arthur Harper's gambling debts. Tell her who orchestrated the squeeze that gave him his fatal heart attack. Chloe's heart stopped. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. She looked at Gabriel's broad back. "Gabriel?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "What is she talking about?" Gabriel slowly turned to face her. The lethal mob boss was gone, replaced by a man staring at a ghost. He reached out a trembling hand toward her. "Chloe, amore mio." "Let me explain." "Did you?" Chloe choked out, tears spilling hot and fast down her cheeks. "Did your family kill my father?" Gabriel swallowed hard, the silence in the bakery louder than a gunshot. He didn't lie. He couldn't. "I didn't know he was your father," Gabriel whispered, his voice thick with agony. "It was business, just a name on a ledger. By the time I found out, it was too late. I came to the bakery to make amends. I came to pay you off." He took a step toward her. "But then I saw you." Chloe backed away, slapping his hand aside as if it burned her. The man who had worshipped her body, the man who had made her feel safe, was the architect of her greatest tragedy. "Get out!" Chloe sobbed, collapsing against the back wall, sliding down to the floor. "Get out, both of you." Camilla smirked in triumph and walked out into the rain. Gabriel stood there for a long, agonizing moment, staring at the woman he loved as she shattered on the floor, surrounded by the torn pieces of a blank check and the ruins of their romance. For the first time in his life, the boss of the Boston Mafia had absolutely no idea how to fix what he had broken. Grief tasted like burnt sugar. For 3 agonizing days, the ovens at Sweet Confections remained cold. Chloe locked the doors, pulled down the green canvas shades facing Hanover Street, and let the darkness swallow her. The bakery, once her sanctuary filled with the scent of vanilla and yeast, now reeked of betrayal. Every corner of the room reminded her of Gabriel. The shattered display case where he had defended her, the marble counter where he had wiped blood from her cheek, the very floorboards that still held the phantom weight of his dominant, protective presence. She scrubbed her hands until they were raw, trying to wash away the memory of his touch, but the ghost of his lips against her neck lingered. He had lied to her. The man who kissed her like she was the only woman on earth was the same monster who had driven her father, Arthur, into an early grave. Desperate to sever the ties, Chloe packed the remaining expensive clothes Gabriel had bought her into garbage bags. She marched through the rain to the First Republic Bank on Federal Street, her soaked sneakers squeaking against the polished granite floors. "I need to reverse a wire transfer," Chloe demanded, sliding her father's cleared loan documents across the desk of a startled bank manager, Mr. Harrison, the debt that was paid off by the Santoro estate. "I want the money returned to them. Put the debt back in my name." Mr. Harrison, a balding man with wire-rimmed glasses, looked at the papers as if they were laced with anthrax. "Mrs. Harper, that is impossible. The funds were cleared through an offshore, irrevocable trust in the Caymans. Attempting to reverse a mafia-linked asset transfer, well, it would trigger a federal audit. Furthermore, the Santoro Syndicate technically owns the holding company that held your father's marker. The debt doesn't exist anymore. You are a free woman." "I am not free," Chloe shouted, tears of sheer frustration prickling her eyes. The few customers in the lobby turned to stare. "It's blood money. I won't let it sit on my father's soul. I suggest you let it go, Ms. Harper," Mr. Harrison's whispered, leaning forward, his eyes darting toward the security cameras. "Men like Gabriel Santoro do not take refunds. You take what they give you, and you pray they don't ask for change." While Chloe fought a losing battle with the banking system, Gabriel was tearing his empire apart. Deep beneath the bustling kitchen of Il Nido, an exclusive, heavily guarded restaurant in the North End, Gabriel sat at the head of a long mahogany table. The room was soundproofed, smelling of rich espresso and impending violence. His top lieutenants, ruthless men who controlled the docks, the unions, and the underground casinos, sat in terrified silence. Gabriel hadn't slept. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw covered in dark stubble, and his custom Brioni suit hung slightly loose on his massive frame. He looked feral. As of this moment, Gabriel's voice was a low, jagged blade scraping against stone. Camilla Santoro is dead to this family. A collective intake of breath echoed around the table. Dante, Gabriel's underboss and oldest friend, shifted uncomfortably. Gabriel, she's your mother. The commission in New York will ask questions if you strip a matriarch of her standing. There are protocols. I don't give a damn about New York. Gabriel roared, slamming his fist onto the table with such force a ceramic espresso cup shattered. She went behind my back. She threatened what is mine. I want her assets frozen at UBS and Credit Suisse. I want her stripped of her security detail. Put her on a private jet to Palermo by midnight. If she sets foot in Boston again, I will put a bullet in her myself. Are we clear? The men nodded hastily. Nobody crossed a grieving, enraged Gabriel. What about the baker? Dante asked softly, risking his boss's wrath. If she knows about Arthur's complications, she's a liability. The Southie factions are already whispering that you've gone soft over a civilian. Gabriel's amber eyes snapped to Dante, completely devoid of humanity. Chloe Harper is untouchable. If anyone in this city so much as looks at her shadow, I will peel their skin off and wear it as a coat. I will fix this. I have to fix this. But Gabriel didn't know that the foundation of Chloe's grief was about to crumble into something far more dangerous. Later that evening, Chloe sat on the floor of her father's old apartment above the bakery. She was packing away Arthur's belongings into cardboard boxes, hoping the physical labor would exhaust her enough to sleep. Arthur had been a quiet, sad man after Chloe's mother died. She had always believed his gambling was a pathetic attempt to win back the money he needed for his failing heart treatments at Massachusetts General Hospital. As she dragged a heavy antique cedar chest across the faded rug, one of the wooden legs snagged, ripping a floorboard loose. Chloe paused, panting, and looked down. Beneath the splintered oak was a hollowed-out cavity. Inside rested a heavy steel lockbox and a black leather ledger. Frowning, Chloe reached into the dust and pulled them out. The lockbox was secured with a heavy biometric padlock, but the ledger was unlocked. She opened it, her eyes scanning the handwritten columns of numbers. Her blood ran cold. Logan Airport Freight, 400K cleaned. Seaport Dock 4, 2M cleaned. Sullivan Syndicate Holding, 3M escrow. This wasn't a gambling ledger. This was a money laundering manifest. Her father, the sweet, bumbling baker, who taught her how to perfectly temper dark chocolate, had been washing millions of dollars for the Sullivan family, the most violent Irish mob in South Boston. Chloe flipped to the final page, her hands trembling violently. There was a frantic note scrawled in her father's handwriting, dated 3 days before his fatal heart attack. They found out about the $3 million. The Santoros intercepted the shipment, but Camilla knows I kept the Sullivan escrow. She's demanding I hand it over to her private account, or she'll tell Finnegan Sullivan I stole it. I can't give it to her. If I do, the Sullivans will kill Chloe. I have to hide it. Chloe dropped the ledger as if it had caught fire. The narrative she had believed for 3 years was a complete lie. Gabriel hadn't squeezed her father over gambling debts. Camilla Santoro had blackmailed him over stolen Irish mob money, orchestrating the squeeze herself. Gabriel had been telling the truth. He didn't know Arthur. He had simply inherited the books. Before Chloe could process the sheer magnitude of this revelation, the heavy wooden door to her apartment splintered inward with a deafening crash. Wood fragments rained across the living room as three massive men poured into the apartment. They wore tactical gear over dark street clothes, their faces obscured by black ski masks. Chloe screamed, scrambling backward over the cardboard boxes, her thick thighs bruising against the sharp corner of the coffee table. "Grab the bitch," a heavily accented voice barked. Chloe fought like a wildcat. As one of the men lunged for her, she grabbed a heavy brass lamp from the end table and smashed it across his skull. He grunted, stumbling back, but the other two were too fast. One grabbed her by her generous hips, hoisting her off the ground, while the other clamped a hand over her mouth, suffocating her screams. She kicked frantically, her sneakers connecting with a kneecap, but a sharp prick in the side of her neck halted her struggle. A heavy, chemical lethargy instantly flooded her veins. The room tilted, the faces of her attackers blurring into shadows as she was dragged down the stairs of the bakery and thrown into the back of an idling panel van. When Chloe finally forced her heavy eyelids open, the smell of salt water, rust, and old diesel fuel assaulted her senses. She was tied to a metal chair in the center of a cavernous, dilapidated warehouse. Rain drummed aggressively against the corrugated tin roof. Through the grime-caked windows, she could see the distant, glowing skyline of Boston and the imposing structure of the Tobin Bridge. She was in the industrial ruins of the Seaport District. "Wakey, wakey, sweetheart." Chloe blinked against the harsh glare of a halogen work light. Stepping out of the shadows was Finnegan Sullivan. He was a terrifying man in his late 50s, with a face mapped by knife scars and a shock of brutal red hair. He held a heavy silver wrench in his hand, tapping it rhythmically against his thigh. "Where is it, Chloe?" Finnegan asked, his voice deceptively soft. He dragged a folding chair over and sat backward on it, mere inches from her. "Where is what?" Chloe rasped, her throat dry and aching. "Don't play dumb with me," Finnegan sneered, leaning in so close she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Your old man, Arthur. He was supposed to wash $3 million for us through his offshore Baker's Union accounts. But the money vanished. A week later, he drops dead of a heart attack, and the Santoros suddenly own his debt. I know Arthur hid my money, and I know he left it for his precious, plump little daughter." "I don't know anything about your money," Chloe cried out, tugging against the zip ties biting into her wrists. "He never told me anything." Finnegan's eyes darkened. He stood up, raising the wrench. "You're going to remember, Chloe, or I'm going to start breaking things. Let's start with those pretty little hands you use to bake." Across the city, in the opulent penthouse of the Millennium Tower, Gabriel was staring out at the rain-slicked city when his private, encrypted cell phone buzzed. It was a burner number. He answered it with a curt, "Speak." "Gabriel Santoro," Finnegan Sullivan's grating voice echoed through the speaker. "I hear you've taken a liking to Arthur Harper's kid, shacking up with a baker." How domestic. Gabriel's blood turned to absolute ice. The world around him tunneled, the ambient noise of the city fading into a high-pitched ring. "Finnegan, if you have touched one hair on her head, I will butcher every single person who shares your last name." Finnegan laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Big words for a wop sitting in a glass tower. "Her father stole $3 million from my crew. I want it back. You have 2 hours to bring me the cash to the old shipyard at Pier 4. If you're late, or if you bring an army, I'm going to cut off her lovely curves piece by piece and mail them to your mother." The line went dead. Gabriel stood frozen for exactly 2 seconds. Then, the civilized facade of the billionaire businessman shattered completely, unleashing the apex predator beneath. He didn't yell. He walked calmly to his reinforced armory closet and punched in the code. He pulled out a matte black tactical vest, strapping it over his bespoke dress shirt. He grabbed two Sig Sauer P226 handguns, racking the slides with mechanical precision, and slid them into his shoulder holsters. He strapped a combat knife to his thigh and grabbed an AR-15 assault rifle. He hit the speed dial on his phone. Dante answered on the first ring. "Gather the ghost squad," Gabriel ordered, his voice an eerie, emotionless void. "Meet me at the basement garage in 5 minutes. Heavy artillery." "Who are we hitting, boss?" Dante asked. "The Sullivan Syndicate," Gabriel replied softly. "Burn Southie to the ground. Leave no survivors." Within 15 minutes, a convoy of 4 pitch-black, armored Cadillac Escalades was tearing through the rain-soaked streets of Boston, blowing through red lights, a mechanical beast roaring toward the seaport. In the back of the lead vehicle, Gabriel sat in utter silence, checking his magazines. His heart, a muscle he had long thought belonged solely to the family business, was beating a frantic, agonizing rhythm against his ribs. "Hold on, Chloe. Please, Mia Dolcezza, just hold on." Inside the warehouse, Chloe's lip was split and bleeding, copper flooding her mouth. Finnegan had backhanded her when she refused to give him the code to the lockbox she had mentally pieced together. She was terrified, but a strange, resilient fire was igniting in her belly. She was a woman who navigated the punishing heat of commercial kitchens. She wasn't going to break for a fading Irish thug. "You're a dead man, Finnegan," Chloe spat, coughing blood onto the concrete floor. "Gabriel will kill you." Finnegan scoffed, pacing in front of her. "Santoro is a suit. He doesn't get his hands dirty anymore. By the time he figures out how to wire the money, I'll have put a bullet in your—" The massive steel bay doors of the warehouse suddenly buckled inward with a catastrophic, ear-shattering boom. An armored Escalade had rammed straight through the barrier, crushing 2 of Finnegan's lookouts beneath its massive tires. Before the vehicle even came to a complete stop, the doors flew open. Flashbang grenades sailed through the air, detonating with blinding, white-hot fury that blew out the remaining windows and sent the Irish thugs screaming, clutching their eyes. From the smoke and chaos emerged Gabriel Santoro. He moved like a reaper. He didn't seek cover. He simply walked forward, his AR-15 raised, dropping Finnegan's men with terrifying surgical precision. Pop, pop, pop. Bodies hit the floor, blood mingling with the rainwater pooling on the concrete. "Kill him!" Finnegan screamed, diving behind a rusty forklift and firing his revolver blindly into the smoke. Chloe screamed against her gag as a stray bullet sparked against the metal chair she was tied to. Gabriel saw her, and for a fraction of a second, the cold assassin faltered. The sight of her bruised face and bleeding lip sent a shockwave of primal rage through his system. He dropped the rifle, drawing both of his handguns, and sprinted toward her. 2 of Finnegan's heavily armed enforcers stepped out from behind a stack of shipping crates, leveling automatic weapons at Gabriel's back. Chloe didn't think, she acted. Desperately kicking her legs out, she hooked her foot around a heavy sack of industrial flour that Finnegan's men had been using for cover. The bag tipped, ripping open on a jagged piece of metal. A massive plume of fine white powder exploded into the air, instantly creating a thick, blinding cloud right in the line of fire. The enforcers coughed, firing blindly into the flour dust. Gabriel spun on his heel, using the distraction. He fired twice, hitting both men squarely in the chest. But in the chaos, Finnegan popped up from behind the forklift, taking aim at Gabriel's exposed back. Bang! Gabriel let out a sharp, guttural grunt as the bullet tore through the meat of his left shoulder. He staggered forward, dropping one of his guns. Chloe screamed his name, thrashing wildly in her chair. Gabriel didn't fall. The pain seemed to only fuel his demonic rage. He turned slowly, his amber eyes locking onto Finnegan with the intensity of a dying star. He stalked toward the Irish boss, ignoring the blood pouring down his arm and staining his crisp white shirt. Finnegan scrambled backward, clicking his revolver, but it was empty. Gabriel grabbed Finnegan by the throat, hoisting the older man completely off the ground with one good arm. "You touched what is mine," Gabriel whispered, the sound carrying over the echoing rain. He drove his combat knife directly upward, burying it to the hilt. Finnegan gasped, his eyes rolling back as Gabriel let his lifeless body crumple to the floor like discarded trash. The warehouse fell eerily silent, save for the rain and the groans of dying men. Dante and the rest of Gabriel's crew secured the perimeter, but Gabriel only had eyes for Chloe. He dropped his weapons and fell to his knees in front of her, his blood-soaked hands trembling as he pulled a switchblade to cut the thick zip ties binding her wrists and ankles. The moment she was free, Chloe collapsed forward. Gabriel caught her with his uninjured arm, pulling her curvy, trembling body flush against his chest, burying his face in her flour-dusted hair. "I've got you," he chanted, his voice thick with unshed tears, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, the blood on her lips. "I'm here, amore mio. You're safe. I've got you." Chloe clung to his tactical vest, sobbing into his chest, her fingers curling into the fabric. She felt the wet, sticky heat of his blood soaking into her own clothes. She pulled back, her eyes wide with panic as she saw the dark crimson spreading rapidly across his shoulder. "Gabriel, you're shot. You're bleeding out." "It's nothing," he grunted, though his face was dangerously pale. He reached up, cupping her soft cheek. "Did he hurt you? Tell me where you're hurt." "I'm fine, but you're not," Chloe cried, acting on pure instinct. She grabbed the hem of her cotton blouse and ripped it violently upward, tearing a long strip of fabric. She ignored her exposed bra, focused entirely on packing the makeshift bandage tightly against Gabriel's bullet wound, applying heavy pressure. "Keep your hand here. Press hard." Gabriel looked at her, entirely mesmerized. Surrounded by bodies, blood, and the ruins of a gang war, this beautiful, soft, incredible woman was tearing her clothes apart to save his life. The sheer depth of his love for her crashed over him like a tidal wave. "Dant!" Gabriel yelled over his shoulder, his vision beginning to blur at the edges. "Get the cars. We need the underground clinic." As Dante hauled Gabriel to his feet, Chloe grabbed his good hand, refusing to let go. They rushed into the back of the Escalade, the doors slamming shut as the convoy tore away from the warehouse, just as police sirens began wailing in the distance. In the dim light of the armored SUV, Gabriel leaned his head back against the leather seat, panting through the pain. Chloe was pressed tightly against his side, keeping pressure on his wound, her tears falling onto his hand. "Gabriel," she whispered, her voice shaking but resolute, "before they took me, I found a ledger in my father's floorboards. It wasn't you." Gabriel forced his heavy eyes open, looking at her in confusion. "What? My father wasn't paying off a gambling debt to you," Chloe choked out, the truth finally coming to light. "He was laundering money for the Sullivans. He stole $3 million. But your mother found out. Camilla found out he kept the escrow. She blackmailed him. She threatened to expose him to Finnegan if he didn't transfer the stolen money to her private accounts. She orchestrated the squeeze that killed him, Gabriel. She pinned it on the family business, so you would never look closely at the books." Gabriel's breath hitched. The pieces violently clicked into place. The sudden, offshore transfers his mother had made 3 years ago. The way she had immediately hated Chloe. Camilla hadn't just insulted a baker. She had tried to bury the daughter of the man she had murdered for $3 million. A dark, terrifying shadow passed over Gabriel's pale face. It wasn't the rage of a mob boss. It was the cold, calculating executioner. "Dante," Gabriel said softly, his voice chilling the air inside the heated SUV. "Yeah, boss?" Dante asked from the front seat, looking in the rearview mirror. "Cancel the flight to Palermo," Gabriel ordered, his eyes never leaving Chloe's face as he gently squeezed her hand. "Find my mother. Do not let her leave the city." The war wasn't over. It was just moving home. Sirens wailed in the distance as the bulletproof Escalade descended into the subterranean parking garage of a private medical facility in Beacon Hill. Gabriel's underground clinic was a sterile, high-tech sanctuary hidden behind the facade of a legitimate plastic surgery center. Dr. Harrison Powell, the syndicate's chief surgeon, was already waiting with a trauma team. They rushed Gabriel into an operating suite, but when nurses tried to pull Chloe away into the waiting room, Gabriel's bloody, unbroken hand snapped out, gripping her wrist with ironclad strength. "She stays," Gabriel growled, his amber eyes burning with a feverish intensity. "Or I walk out of here with the bullet still in me." Dr. Powell didn't argue. Chloe stood by the surgical table, her hands covered in flour and Gabriel's blood, holding his good hand tightly while the surgeon worked with local anesthetics to dig the 9mm slug out of Gabriel's shoulder muscle. Through it all, Gabriel never took his eyes off Chloe. He didn't flinch at the scalpel. His only anchor was the tear-stained face of the woman who had just risked her life in a warehouse shootout to save him. While Gabriel was being stitched up, Dante was executing his boss's final order. At the private aviation terminal of Logan International Airport, Camilla Santoro sat in the luxurious leather seat of a chartered Gulfstream G650. She was sipping a glass of Dom Perignon, her Louis Vuitton luggage stowed securely. She had arranged a transfer of $15 million to a Swiss account and was mentally planning her new life on the Amalfi Coast. Gabriel would cool down eventually, she reasoned. He always did. He was a man of logic, and once he realized the baker was a liability, he would welcome his mother back. The heavy cabin door suddenly opened. The captain didn't step through. Dante ducked his head to clear the doorframe, followed by 3 heavily armed men in dark suits. Rain dripped from Dante's trench coat onto the plush carpet. Camilla's glass paused halfway to her lips. "Dante, what is the meaning of this?" "Tell the pilot we are cleared for takeoff." "Flight's cancelled," Camilla, Dante said, his voice entirely devoid of the respect he usually afforded the matriarch. He stepped forward, snatching the crystal flute from her hand and tossing the expensive champagne onto the floor. "Gabriel wants a word." An hour later, Gabriel sat behind his massive mahogany desk at the harbor importing firm, his left arm bound tightly in a black sling. Chloe sat on a leather sofa in the corner, wrapped in one of Gabriel's oversized cashmere sweaters, nursing a cup of hot tea. The silence in the office was suffocating. The double doors swung open, and Dante shoved Camilla into the room. The matriarch stumbled, losing her footing in her designer heels, her perfect hair slightly disheveled. "Gabriel," Camilla snapped, regaining her posture and smoothing her jacket. "This is an outrage. I am your mother. You allow your men to manhandle me like a common street thug." "You are a common street thug," Gabriel said softly. His voice lacked the booming rage he had shown at the bakery. This was worse. This was the cold, calculating detachment of a mob boss delivering a death sentence. Gabriel reached into his desk drawer with his good hand. He pulled out the black leather ledger Dante had retrieved from the ruined apartment and tossed it onto the center of the desk. It landed with a heavy, condemning thud. Camilla's arrogant expression shattered instantly. All the color drained from her aristocratic face, leaving her looking old and hollow. "Arthur Harper," Gabriel said, tasting the name. "You found out he kept the Sullivans' escrow. $3 million. pocket change to this family, but you couldn't resist. You blackmailed a dying man, forced him to wire the funds to your Cayman accounts, and then ordered his legs broken to send a message. Only his heart gave out in the panic. "Gabriel, listen to me," Camilla stammered, taking a desperate step forward. He was a nobody, a weak, pathetic baker. That money belonged to the underworld, and I simply claimed it before the Irish could. It was business. It was murder. Chloe's voice rang out from the corner. She stood up, her curvy frame trembling with a mixture of exhaustion and righteous fury. He was my father. He was a good man who made a terrible mistake to pay for his medical bills. And you slaughtered him for greed. Camilla sneered, her toxic pride flaring one last time. "You think you can judge me, you little pastry chef? I built this empire while you were scrubbing baking sheets. Gabriel will never choose a civilian over his own blood." Gabriel stood up, wincing slightly as his shoulder protested. He walked slowly around the desk and stopped inches from the woman who had given him life. "You're right," Gabriel whispered. "I don't choose civilians over blood, but you are no longer my blood." He pulled a thick legal dossier from his jacket and dropped it on the desk. "I'd just spent the last hour on the phone with the board of directors and the New York Commission. I have formally excommunicated you. You have been stripped of the Santoro name. But I am not going to kill you, Mother. Death is too quick for what you did to Chloe's family." Camilla looked at the papers, her breath hitching. "What did you do?" "I seized your offshore accounts," Gabriel said coldly. "All of them. I liquidated your real estate, your trust funds, and your art collection. The $3 million you stole from Arthur. I just donated it to the cardiology ward at Massachusetts General Hospital in Arthur Harper's name. The rest of your fortune, nearly $80 million, has been distributed to charities across Boston." "No," Camilla gasped, clutching her chest. "You can't. That is my money." "I have nothing. You have exactly what you deserve," Gabriel replied. He nodded to Dante. "The FBI has been tipped off about a money-laundering matriarch trying to flee the country. They are waiting downstairs in the lobby. Escort Mrs. Rossi, her maiden name, to the federal agents." Camilla screamed, completely losing her aristocratic composure, thrashing as Dante and another guard dragged her out of the office. Her shrieks echoed down the hallway until the heavy elevator doors sealed her fate. When the room finally fell silent, Gabriel turned to Chloe. The ruthless mafia boss was gone. He looked exhausted, vulnerable, and completely bare before her. He walked over and slowly sank to his knees in front of her, burying his face in the soft curve of her stomach, wrapping his good arm around her waist. "It's over," he murmured into her sweater. "The debt is paid. The truth is out. You're free, Chloe. If you want to walk out that door and never see me again, I will let you go. I will buy you a bakery anywhere in the world. Just tell me what you want." Chloe looked down at the most feared man in Boston, kneeling before her like a devoted disciple. She thought of the blank check Camilla had torn up, a symbol of manipulation. But Gabriel had just given up his own mother to bring her justice. He had taken a bullet for her. He had loved every curve, every insecurity, and every part of her soul. Chloe gently wove her fingers into his dark hair, pulling his face up to look into her tear-filled blue eyes. "I want to go home, Gabriel," she whispered softly. "I want to go back to the bakery. With you." Gabriel's breath caught. He stood up, pulling her flush against his chest, capturing her lips in a bruising, desperate kiss that tasted of salt, tears, and absolute salvation. 6 months later, Sweet Confections reopened, but it was no longer a struggling shop in a run-down alley. It was a sprawling, gorgeous corner bakery on Hanover Street, funded legally and cleanly. Chloe Harper stood behind the counter in a beautifully fitted chef's coat, that proudly hugged her generous hips and full bust. And every afternoon, a fleet of black SUVs would park out front, and the terrifying boss of the Santoro syndicate would walk in, take a seat at the corner table, and watch his beautiful, curvy queen rule her empire with a dusting of powdered sugar and a smile that had finally learned how to heal. Behind the closed doors of Boston's high-rises and the bustling kitchens of the North End, real power isn't always about violence. It's about loyalty, justice, and the courage to protect the ones you love. Chloe and Gabriel's story proves that true beauty isn't measured by a dress size, and real wealth isn't written on a blank check. It's built on resilience and truth. If this intense romantic mafia drama kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button. Share this incredible story with your friends who love a fierce, curvy heroine and a devoted, protective boss. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more thrilling, real-life-inspired storytelling. Drop a comment below. What would you have done with the blank check? See you in the next video.